Do. Hello. Let's make sure I can hear myself. Let's see. Oh, can you hear me? Um, do. Um, There we go. Can I hear myself? There we go. Ah, yeah, I can hear myself. Good. Just checking that my mic is on. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so tired. Oh goodness. Hello. Welcome in. I'm gonna wait a few minutes to see if some people are gonna join. I guess I need to silence my phone. Oh, why is it on? That's interesting. My connection is unstable. Awesome. Awesome sauce. Is it buffering or am I okay? It's been a while since I've been on live. Mm. My brain is trying to think of things to say, waiting for people to join. Brain's not braining. The last couple of weeks have been pretty rough. So tonight I am going to go ahead and read more of The Body Keeps the Score. I believe I know where we left off. I'm not sure. But if I miss something, I'll go back and check and make sure that I see brain. It's buffering. My brain is buffering. I'll go back and make sure that I started where we stopped off. So and then next week I will fill in anything that we may have missed. So, all right. So for tonight, what I was thinking is that I am going to do like 30, 45 minutes of reading, and then I will take questions. And to make things easier for me on the back end, I'm not really going to interact with the comments while I'm reading. Hello, welcome in, Kim. And then we'll just do like a discussion of what we read, or if you've read the book before, kind of go over what we read and what your feelings on it. So this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. The Body Keeps the Score. It's been highly recommended by a lot of people. I ran across somebody that said that they couldn't read it, and I was like, that's interesting. You're the first person that I, heard that from. So I was kind of interested in the why and curious. But so that's kind of the format for tonight. I realized when I was going back to edit the previous book that we read, there was a lot of stopping and it just wasn't very coherent in the video. So the playback's going to be really, really hard if I don't just read and then we discuss. So Hello. Welcome in. Thank you for the likes. Oh, all right. So I am also streaming on YouTube, and I have the text up while I'm reading if you want to read along with me, or if you don't mind being on TikTok and just listening. Either way. So, how about we just jump right in and start reading, and then about 8:30, 8:45, we'll start the discussion. All right. Oh, wait, I need to change the format. I'm so rusty at this. Where you at? There you go. There we go. That's better. How are y'all doing tonight while I'm getting everything set up? Is everybody doing well? Oh, I am. It took a 2-hour nap, and I feel a little bit better because I felt like I was going to fall on the floor and die of exhaustion. All right. Let's just jump in. So, this is The Body Keeps the Score, and I forgot the author's name. I'm so terrible with names. Oh, yeah. We're supposed to get rain tomorrow. All right. Let's jump in. Stuck in trauma. And I'm going to make words pretty for TikTok and YouTube so I don't get nixed. Stuck in trauma. Our clinic was inundated with veterans seeking psychiatric help. However, because of an acute shortage of qualified doctors, all we could do was put most of them on a waiting list, even as they continued brutalizing themselves and their families. We began seeing a sharp increase in arrests of veterans for violent offenses and drunken brawls, as well as an alarming number of unalivings. I received permission to start a group for young Vietnam veterans to serve as a sort of holding tank until real, quote unquote, real therapy. Hey, kid, so good to see you. Could start at the opening session. If Do me a favor, if anybody comes in and they're like, why aren't you addressing people who are coming in? Just let them know that I'm going to read till about 8:30, 8:45, and then we'll discuss, because I just kind of don't want to keep interrupting the flow. Um, let's see, where was I? The opening session for a group of former Marines, the first man to speak flatly declared, I do not want to talk about the war. I replied that the members could discuss anything they wanted. After half an hour of excruciating silence, one veteran finally started to talk about his helicopter crash. To my amazement, the rest immediately came to life, speaking with great intensity about their traumatic experiences. All of them returned the following week and the week after. In the group, they found resonance and meaning in what had previously been only sensations of terror and emptiness. They felt a renewed sense of comradeship. Comradeship. I Words are hard today. You know what I mean. That had been so vital to their war experience. The camaraderie. Yes. They insisted that I had to be part of their newfound unit and gave me a Marine captain's uniform for my birthday. In retrospect, that gesture revealed part of the problem. You were either in or out. Sound familiar? You either belonged to the unit or you were nobody. After trauma, the world becomes sharply divided between those who know and those who don't. People who have not shared the traumatic experience cannot be trusted because they can't understand it. Sadly, this often includes spouses, children, and coworkers. Later, I led another group, this time for veterans of Patton's Army. Men now well into their 70s, all old enough to be my father. We met on Monday mornings at 8 o'clock. In Boston, winter snowstorms occasionally paralyzed the wait. Blah, blah, blah. In Boston, winter snowstorms occasionally paralyzed the public transit system, but to my amazement, all of them showed up even during blizzards. Some of them trudging several miles through the snow to reach the VA clinic. For Christmas, they gave me a 1940s GI issue wristwatch. Excuse me. As had been the case with my group of Marines, I could not be their doctor unless they made me one of them. Moving as these experiences were, the limits of group therapy became clear when I urged the men to talk about the issues they confronted in their daily lives: their relationship with their wives, children, girlfriends, and family, dealing with their bosses and finding satisfaction in their work, their heavy use of alcohol. The typical response was to balk and resist and instead recount yet again how they had plunged a dagger through the heart of a German soldier in the Hergden Forest, or how the helicopter had been shot down in the jungles of Vietnam. Whether the trauma had occurred 10 years in the past or more than 40, my patients could not bridge the gap between their wartime experiences and their current lives. Somehow, the very event that caused them so much pain had also become their sole source of meaning. They felt fully alive only when they were revisiting their traumatic past. Wow, that's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but I never thought about it that way. Diagnosing post traumatic stress. In those early days at the VA, we labeled our veterans with all sorts of diagnoses: alcoholism, substance abuse, depression, mood disorder, even schizophrenia, and we tried every treatment in our textbooks. But for all our efforts, it became clear that we were actually accomplishing very little. The powerful rugs we prescribed often left the men in such a fog that they could barely function. When we encouraged them to talk about the precise details of a traumatic event, we often inadvertently triggered a full-blown flashback, rather than helping them resolve the issue. Many of them dropped out of treatment because we were not only failing to help, but also sometimes making things worse. It's what happens when you experiment on people. But I guess you have to figure out what works before you can do it. A turning point arrived in 1980 when a group of Vietnam veterans, aided by the New York psychoanalysts Chaim Chitan and Robert J. Lifton, successfully lobbied the American Psychiatric Association to create a new diagnosis: post traumatic stress disorder, which described a cluster of symptoms that was common, to a greater or lesser extent, to all our veterans. Systematically identifying the symptoms and grouping them together into a disorder finally gave a name to the suffering of people who were overwhelmed by horror and helplessness. With the conceptual framework of PTSD in place, the stage was set for a radical change in our understanding of our patients. This eventually led to an expansion of research and attempts at finding effective treatments. Inspired by the possibilities presented by this new diagnosis, I proposed a study on the biology of traumatic memories to the VA. Did the memories of those suffering from PTSD what? Um, my mouse just died. Did the memories of those suffering from PTSD differ from those of others? For the most part, the memory of an unpleasant event eventually fades and or is transformed into something more benign. But most of our patients were unable to make their past into a story that happened long ago. The opening line of the grant rejection read, quote unquote, "It has never been shown that PTSD is relevant to the mission of the Veterans Administration." End quote. Interesting. Since then, of course, the mission of the VA has become organized around the diagnosis of PTSD and brain injury, and considerable resources are dedicated to applying evidence-based treatments to traumatized war veterans. But at the time, things were different, and unwilling to keep working in an organization whose view of reality was so at odds with my own, I handed in my resignation. In 1982, I took a position at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center, the Harvard teaching hospital where I trained to become a psychiatrist. My new responsibility was to teach a fledgling area of study, psychopharmacology, the administration of drugs to alleviate mental illness. In my new job, I was confronted on an almost daily basis with issues I thought I had left behind at the VA. My experience with combat veterans had so sensitized me to the impact of trauma that I now listened with a very different ear when depressed and anxious patients told me stories of, I don't know how to say this on TikTok, um, a person touching you unwantedly when you're a child, and family violence. I was particularly struck by how many female patients spoke of being sexually abused as children. This was puzzling, and the standard textbook of psychiatry at the time stated that familial intimacy, TikTok word, was extremely rare in the United States, occurring about once in every million women. We know that wasn't true back then either. Given that there were then only about 100 million women living in the United States, I wondered how 47, almost half of them, had found their way to my office in the basement of the hospital. Furthermore, the textbook said, open quote, there is little agreement about the role of father-daughter intimacy. I don't know. How do you say that without saying the word? You know what I mean. As a source of serious subsequent psychopathology, end quote. My patients with that history with their fathers were hardly free of open quote subsequent psychopathology, end quote. They were profoundly depressed, confused, and often engaged in bizarrely self-harmful behaviors, such as sharp objects on themselves with things you shave with. The textbook went on to practically endorse father-daughter relations. I keep losing my spot. Explaining that, open quote, such the word that I can't say, activity diminishes the subject's chance of psychosis and allows for a better adjustment to the external world, end quote. In fact, hey, Tim, absolutely, not a problem. I'm glad you're here. In fact, as it turned out, the father-daughter relations had devastating effects on women's well-being. Go figure. In many ways, these patients were not so different from the veterans I had just left behind at the VA. They also had nightmares and flashbacks. They also alternated between occasional bouts of explosive rage and long periods of being emotionally shut down. This is talking, I don't know when you jumped in, but this was talking about when he left the VA and he went to a teaching hospital, I think Harvard's teaching hospital, and he was doing group therapy, and the women were victims of father-daughter intimacy. I can't say that word on TikTok or YouTube, if you know what I mean. I don't know if I read the sentence. Most of them had great difficulty getting along with other people and had trouble maintaining meaningful relationships. As we know, as we now know, war is not the only calamity that leaves human lives in ruins. While about a quarter of the soldiers who serve in war zones are expected to develop serious post-traumatic problems, the majority of Americans experience a violent crime at some time during their lives. And more accurate reporting has revealed that 12 million women in the United States have been, turn the page, victims of rape. More than half of all rapes occur in girls between age 15. Oh, in girls below age 15. For many people, the war begins at home. Each year, about 3 million children in the United States are reported as victims of child abuse and neglect. 1 million of these cases are serious and credible enough to force local child protective services or the courts to take action. In other words, for every soldier who serves in a war zone abroad, there are 10 children who are endangered in their own homes. This is particularly tragic since it is very difficult for growing children to recover when the source of terror and pain is not any combatants, but their own caretakers. Mm. Okay. A new understanding. In the 3 decades since I met Tom, we had learned an enormous amount not only about the impact and manifestations of trauma, but also about ways to help traumatized people find their way back. Since the early 1990s, brain imaging tools have started to show us what actually happens inside the brains of traumatized people. This has proven essential to understanding the damage inflicted by trauma and has guided us to formulate entirely new avenues of repair. We have also begun to understand how overwhelming experiences affect our innermost sensations and our relationship to our physical reality, the core of who we are. We have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past, it is also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body. This imprint has ongoing consequences for how the human organism managed to survive in the present. Whew. Sorry. um had a bad week last week, and so was kind of worried about reading this book. So if I disassociate some, just know it's not you, it's me. Hmm. Trauma results in a fundamental reorganization of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. Thank you, Tim. We have discovered that helping victims of trauma find the words to describe what has happened to them is profoundly meaningful, but usually it is not enough. The act of telling the story doesn't necessarily alter the automatic physical and hormonal responses of bodies that remain hypervigilant, prepared to be. Hmm, I don't know if I can say this word on TikTok or YouTube. We'll see. Oh, I'm good. Just just working through some thoughts that are going through my head as I'm reading. So, okay, assaulted or violated at any time. For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed and to live in reality of the present. Let's read that again because I think I need to hear it again. For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed and to live in the reality of the present. Presently, I am here with y'all. Ah, I am not there. Nothing's happening to me. I am good. Our search to understand trauma has led us to think differently, not only about the structure of the mind, but also about the process of which it heals. Oh, I don't know what I just said. Our search to understand trauma has led us to think differently, not only about the structure of the mind, but also about the process by which it heals. Gotcha. All right. It's that chapter 2. I think I need to stop tonight, I'll be honest. I don't think I can go on. So, how about we talk about what we just read and have a little chitty chat? Hmm. Oh. And that's 10 children with self-reporting. A lot of victims of child abuse don't recognize it until yeah. So I'm 46 and last week I realized something. I had a traumatic memory that surfaced and I'm processing it. And it's kind of one of the reasons that I wanted to do this is because I'm trying to not overthink and spend time constantly going over things in my head. And I really don't want to remember any more than what I've already remembered. So, um, trying to keep myself busy. So, so he said in that book that it's 10 children for every veteran that had PTSD essentially. And forget when this book was written. But I'm sure it's the numbers have increased since. Um, and then you have to also consider that a lot of the veterans are also victims of child abuse themselves. Let me, do you mind if I pop your comment up on the screen there, Tim? Um, so, um, something that, okay, let me go ahead and read your comment. According to my therapist, the healing for PTSD is that you want to get to where you can remember the trauma without having to relive it. I've been able to have breakthroughs on a few things and it's a whole thing. Thank you. So I'll be honest, I don't want to remember at all. Um, not right now. Maybe in the future I'll be ready, but I just can't go there. Um and then um so what I've been working on lately is I recently realized that I did not learn emotional regulation. Go figure. My parents were pretty young when they had my older sister and I, and um they're baby boomers. So, they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the knowledge, and they didn't model emotional regulation for me, and I didn't learn it. And then as I was a single mom with 3 kids, when I left my ex-husband, my oldest was 6, and then I had a 5-year-old and a 6-month-old. And then my oldest is ADHD, my middle child has is on the spectrum. So we had a lot of stuff going on with the transition from being in a family to being on our own. And they struggled with the ADHD and the autism stuff, and they were homeschooled for kindergarten and preschool, and then for first grade and kindergarten, they went into public school. and so it was kind of a culture shock for him. That a lot of changes within like a couple month period for them. It was, it's kind of hard for them, and they didn't have emotional regulation because they were little, and I didn't have emotional regulation because I didn't know what that was or that I needed it. And so I was just full of anxiety and worry and stress, and it was tough. And um so now at 46, I am trying to learn emotional regulation, and I had a talk with my son, my oldest. I had to bring him to work today, and he was asking me, um oh, this is what he asked me. I hope he doesn't mind me saying the story. He usually doesn't. Um he had asked me about the way he kind of blew up at me when he was a kid. Basically, I was their safe place, and I was the place they could lose it, and they could just let it all out and vent, and, um, they could say anything to me, and I was never going to stop loving them. And I kept telling them that you can tell me anything. They have told me they have told me that they wanted to, you know, um, typical, kid stuff, but a little bit more serious because of the trauma that they experienced and the intensity of their feelings because of autism and ADHD. So, he asked me, he's like, "Is it reasonable to ask somebody to handle that in a relationship?" And I was like, "No, son. You were a kid. You're an adult now. Like, it's different." And I said, my husband now, I was like, "I can't treat Jeremy the way that you treated me when you were a kid. He wouldn't stick around for that." I said, "Your partner deserves more respect than that." So, it was kind of a light bulb moment for him, you know. And so I think we're going to have some more conversations about emotional regulation as I'm learning it. I can also give him some tips and tricks, or, whatever, and insight into what I'm learning. And maybe we can learn how to emotionally regulate together, because it's tough. It is tough trying to learn this at 46. That's all I gotta say. Uh, Tim says, "Same. I never learned emotional regulation or a bunch of other critical life skills that the cult just never touched on or set me up to be a victim." I mean, the cult was just about making you prime for being taken advantage of, because they were taking advantage of you. And so they had to psychologically and emotionally manipulate you so they could do that. And then you thought that was normal. So you expected everybody to treat you that way. Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything else in the book that stuck out to you, or anybody that has read past where we're at? You have any insights on processing our trauma? And Um, I'll say this, like I say a lot, is if you haven't been in therapy, get in therapy. Um, and make sure it is a licensed therapist. There are plenty therapists that, if you are still in on a spiritual path, that they can, whatchamacallit, they have I guess, a spiritual component to their therapy, but you definitely want a licensed therapist. On YouTube, I do have a episode with a licensed therapist, Celia Behar. She is the co-host of a podcast that used to be, I don't think they've done it in a while, but Jodie Sweetin from Full House and Fuller House, they are like best friends, and they had a podcast, and I used to listen to them all the time. And I reached out to her and I was like, "I know you're a therapist. I have a podcast, and I really want to help my community to, learn how to find a therapist, because therapists weren't something that we were allowed to really do in the cult." So, it's a really good episode, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go check it out. Um, I call it a franchise system of cults. Every church and father was basically a cult leader. Yeah, you have the big cult and then you have the family cult, right? Um, See, and me, I know some of y'all might have heard this before, but I always joke that I was in three cults simultaneously because I joined IBLP a couple weeks before I went to basic training. So I was in the military, a cult. And then while I was stationed in Florida, I went to an IFB church. So I was in IBLP when I went home with my family and, you know, interacting with that. And then at home, when I was, back in Florida, I was at the IFB church and then I was also in the military. So, I mean, like, just me. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way and to the biggest extent I can. Oh. Internal family systems have helped me a lot. That's another thing that I'm exploring because I recently realized I was called the black sheep of my family for so long, but I didn't realize that that was synonymous with um brain whoop, buffering with scapegoat in the family system. And the scapegoats, from what I understand, that I'm learning, are basically scapegoated because they buck the system and they throw out the truth. And yeah, I'm not one of those people that can pretend to be shiny happy. I had a hard time when I was at headquarters trying to be shiny happy person. It was rough. And it really affects me when I try to suppress all of the things that are inside of me and I'm not authentic to myself. Um yeah, that was part of my journey for sure. And then um understanding how my older sister was the golden child and I was the scapegoat. And then I have a brother who's 9 years younger than me, and then my little sister is 20 years younger than me. So there's a lot of gaps in there, and there was a lot of changes in my family. We started Catholic, then when my brother was like soon after my brother was born, we started like maybe going to Baptist church, like so somewhere between 9 and 12, I think. And then by the time I had just turned 18, my family was in IBLP and they drugged me in it. So, um, so yeah, kind of little cliff notes on my story. But yeah, and that's definitely something I want to explore more. Um, is the family systems and learning how to emotionally regulate. And the other day, oh my goodness, one of my kids was having a really bad day and I was working and I was really, really stressed because he kept interrupting me and it wasn't something that he could really control. And so I was trying to not get too worked up about it and it was really stressing me out. And my little sister came in and we talked and I just kind of said how I was feeling because I had to get it out. And then I just started saying, um, I can't fix it. He's responsible for his actions. All I can do is set boundaries. And I just kept saying that until I felt more calm, and reminding myself that I'm not responsible for managing his emotional dysregulation because he's an adult now and that he's got to learn how to do it on his own. So, Panda says, basically, you learn to reparent yourself. Yeah, that's I never connected that before, but yeah, the parenting your inner child kind of thing. It's that's definitely part of it. Yeah. So, um I am focusing more on because I have a very bad anxiety and I do battle with depression is not letting other people's anxiety and depression affect my anxiety and depression, which is extremely hard. especially with some of the um, heavy things that I deal with my kids. Um, so one of my kids is just really struggling, and it's been a couple of years that he's just not been able to get out of his struggles. And I've tried to do everything I can to help him. And at this point, he's got to want to. And it's just it's a slow process. And it's hard to see somebody struggle so hard for so long. And then they decide, okay, I want to do better. And then they keep hitting bumps. And I know that's part of the process. I know it's not going to be like flip a switch and you're okay, but it's really hard to see your kid not turn that corner and keep falling down or, making mistakes. And, I keep telling them, it's just part of the process and just got to keep trying, and mistakes are going to happen, and don't beat yourself up about it. So Tim says, one thing that has helped me reconcile whether something was abuse or fair to do to a child is to think about a way we were treated at a specific age, and then think about what it would take to have me treat a child that age in the same way. Most of the time, I cannot think of any action that a child could do to make me treat them in that manner. So that's something that I've been kind of thinking about too, is because of Dobson passing away and the Strong Willed Child book and his discipline tactics and everything, and all the videos that people share in their stories about what happened to them as children. And they can't imagine parents doing that. I'll be honest, I can kind of imagine it because I did it as a parent early. I used to train up a child because I was in the cult and that's what you were supposed to do. And it didn't sit well with me, of course. But Um, and it was a couple of years, but still, I did it. And when, as a parent, you are so scared of your kids turning out to be hoodlums or, drug addicts and rug addicts, whatever. And that fear is constantly reinforced. Every time you go to church, every time you hear a message, you've got to keep your kids on the right path. You are so petrified of them doing something that's going to alter their life for the rest of their life that you are willing to do anything to do it the right way. And you're not thinking about what effect your doing has on them in that moment. And it's so I can understand. But it didn't take me long to figure out that this is not the way, you know? And so that's the part that I don't understand, is how they could spend decades doing this to multiple children. My youngest has never experienced but maybe one or two spankings from me ever. And, he's a much more emotionally regulated child, and he did not have as much exposure to his father. Panda says, I tell my kids, don't be so hard on yourself. You've never been X years old before. We are all learning ev- everything every day. Perfection is a lie. Absolutely. And I keep telling my kids, progress, not perfection. It doesn't matter as long as you are moving forward. And even if you hit a bump, you get back up and you keep moving forward. And even if you come back a little bit on your progress and you got to kind of retrace your steps, that's still okay. Tim says that's another good point. Parents were victims too. Absolutely. I mean, there was somebody, a video I was watching, and it made me realize that um oh, I just lost my thought. It went right out my head. We're talking about parents being victims. Okay. So the baby boomers, a lot of them, so we're talking about after World War II, we have a lot of people who are suffering from PTSD. We also have Vietnam veterans who are, then we have Vietnam veterans that have PTSD. And home life was not, you know, safe for a lot of people. And they experienced a lot of abuse. And I think some of it, and I'm not going to say all of it, and it's not an excuse, but it's just information, right? Like, so they didn't know anything different. That's what they thought love was. And so when they're presented with a different way, because they knew it, how it affected them was wrong, right? But maybe we can do that thing that my parents did because they thought that was love, but we can do it better. We can do it in a way that is loving. And so I think Gothard and Dobson and all of these IFB pastors have um, used that to manipulate these parents and thinking that that's the correct thing to do, but you can do it differently, and that's love. And so, and they normalized it as love because then they could accept that their parents actually loved them and weren't abusive to them. So I think it's pretty, it's all stems from abuse and from being traumatized and not understanding real healthy relationships because they didn't have the information back in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s and some 90s. I mean, like in the 2000s we started like seeing a lot of progress when it came to mental health and talking about abuse and survivors, coming out, and then the Me Too movement. So like things have progressed in the last 25 years a lot faster than I remember things, progressing from the time I was like a young teen to like my mid 20s. So it's and it's not an excuse for those parents cuz the harm was done and you can't take it back. But I think it helps us understand a little bit better of how they got sucked into it and how they could have thought that was the right thing to do. Because a lot of, okay, not all of them, but a lot of these parents were truly trying to find a way to raise their kids where they wouldn't become, menaces to society. And that was kind of like a cultural thing too during that period, not just in the church, but Gen X, we were the rebels, and we were pushing back against stuff, and there was a lot of pushback between the 60s and 70s and 80s between the civil rights movement, women's suffrage, and Gen X, and our punk era. So it's it's definitely a different time, definitely a lot less knowledge about how things affected children. I mean, he was saying in his book, I mean, like he was on the brink of, he was one of the people that were the founding people of treating PTSD. And so, you know, the wheels turn slowly at first. Tim says we are getting better as individuals and social understanding. Like we don't know about all of these things. Yeah. And knowledge is power, right? And that's kind of where we are as survivors, is we want the knowledge to do better. We want the understanding to do better. And sure, it's hard to forgive our parents for what they did, and some people can't. And I think if there's any parents out there that are listening to this that were parents in IBLP or following Dobson, and you disciplined your children in this manner, what you really need to understand is that all your kids are looking for is acknowledgement that you caused harm and saying that you're sorry for it, and then also changing to treat them differently. Because if you do not acknowledge that you harmed them, you don't apologize that you harmed them, and you do not change your behavior, you will get your kids to go no contact, because nobody wants to sit there and receive the same abuse that they received their whole entire childhood as an adult. And that was something that took a long time for one of my parents to understand. was that because the how many of you have heard this? Well, we had in good intentions, so doesn't matter if you had good intentions. And my kids teach me so much more than my parents ever did. And my middle son told me one day, because I was like, I didn't know better. Like I was genuinely sorry. He was like, I didn't know any better. And he's like, intent doesn't negate harm. And I'm like, oh, you're right. I am so sorry, son. I hurt you. That was wrong, you know? And having your kids teach you something that profound is amazing and humbling at the same time. But, it gives me hope for, their generation that things are going to be different because the way that things are with patriarchy and the way that, things are run and having so many old freaking people that are living in the past, running our country, not understanding how we live today because they had much more advantages than us. They had more buying power than we did. And yeah, I'm trying not to go political because then I'll get on my soapbox and I'll never get off. Tim says also, tell your kids they are enough. Yes, absolutely. You are perfect just the way you are. That's absolutely right. The cult, Dobson, and the rest, without saying it, they taught generations of kids that love can only be had if you are perfect in your behavior. Love, especially to kids, should not be conditional. Absolutely. Something that I always told my kids is, look, it doesn't matter what you do. I'm going to always love you. And that conditional love and the emotional manipulation and I had a parent that was financially manipulative. It's like, excuse me. I didn't want to do that to my kids, and so I I get advice from my younger brother and sister a lot because they were I had a different childhood than they did, being raised Catholic, and then in my formative years is where it started changing, and so that was a lot of like when I'm forming my personality, everything is changing, so it was really weird. But I didn't experience the abuse that they did. And so I go to them and, ask advice like, this is what I want to do. What do you think? Is this, and then I also try to think, well, if my, if I was the child and my parent was doing this to me, how would I want them to handle it? You know? So, and that's one of the biggest driving forces as me for a parent. I probably since I left the cults, like when I left my ex, is parenting my children the way I wish I would have been parenting, which is not going to work for every kid, but and you've got to, tweak it for each child because every child is different, but being there for them, getting them the help that they need, supporting them, realizing that they're kids and they can't do things that adults do, so they need to be taught, you know, that kind of stuff. Not getting upset because they put something in the dishwasher the wrong way. I either go behind them and fix it or I say, "Hey, look, this fits better this way." Or, "Hey, when I load the dishwasher, I do it this way and it seems to fit more dishes." It's not a, "Oh my God, I've told you 10,000 times to load the dishwasher this way." You know? Um So, just giving grace for them to learn how to do things. And honestly, it's okay if they do things differently. As long as the dishes get washed, who the fuck cares? So, mm. All right, guys, it is been almost an hour. I am exhausted. This was really fun. I thank y'all so much for being here. And as long as I am not in a really bad flare, I do plan to do this weekly. So mark your calendars. We will be here next Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Time, and we will be reading more of The Body Keeps the Score. And the format, I've kind of decided to kind of change it up a little bit. And I'll read for 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have the discussion about what we read or anything else y'all want to talk about. Um, if you are on TikTok and you want to get on TikTok, I could even have people come up and we could talk on the live. So, and if you are on TikTok, because of the new terms of service, you may want to follow me on all the other platforms because I don't know how long my account is going to stay up after that. Because you basically can't say shit about shit after the new terms. We'll see. um, but with that, I will end this episode. And if somebody has not told you today or ever, I am proud of you. Y'all have a great night.